Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about?
Hey. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
me.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Yes,
you for
ma'am.
joining me. I'm going to send out a text right now and see where they at.
We got
Hey, where
this. We
y'all
got
at?
this. We got this.
Oh, how's it going? How's your week?
It's going well. Week has been busy. This was the last week of school, so we now officially have a high school senior and a middle school eighth grader. Yeah, man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then our daughter turns 13 on Sunday, so she enters into the teenage years on Sunday.
Oh,
She's
that's a
quite
big
excited.
deal.
She's
That's a
quite
big
excited.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like all the big parties, the limos, and everything all ready to go. I mean,
Yeah,
the
we're not doing the limo part, but everything else that yeah, that part she can we can withhold that, but everything else,
oh,
oh yeah, she's all
oh
excited.
my goodness,
Yeah.
13.
Yes,
Woo.
I don't like any of it.
But I imagine as a parent, and I'm not a parent yet, but I imagine that is, I feel some kind of way watching the church babies grow up. So
Yeah,
I
it's,
cannot even imagine how I'm gonna feel when my own get 13.
when they tell you enjoy it all, it goes by really fast. You kind of like, okay, I hear you smirk it off. That junk is true. It goes by really fast. Like our son entering his senior year of high school, our daughter turning 13. It's like, well, I remember bringing them home, Lisa. And so I carried pictures of them when they were babies because that's how I still see them.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and my daughter's been counting down since the month of May began. And now it's like, it's here.
it's here.
It's
And
here.
it's so crazy. It just seems like, I mean, just with time itself, and I don't know whether it's just me, but I feel like it's moving like in double step or something.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
going so quickly. It's going
Mm-hmm.
by so quickly. I'm like, you think, okay, well, I could sit that right there. I got time to do that. And then when you look up, it's like, no, you
Don't have time
didn't
to do
have
that.
the time you thought you had.
You didn't
Like,
have time to do that. Correct.
whoa, you did not have the time you thought you had. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. And so interesting enough that you would say that, because I was thinking when I reached out to you about doing this particular topic, I was like, oh wait, before I even say that, listen, everybody that's watching, this is Kitchen Talk, CTC, Conversations That Cook. I forgot to say that at the top of it. We are here with Darrick D. McGhee Sr., one of our returning guests that always comes back and talks with us about this whole voting and elections and making sure we staying on top of stuff, because we got to keep the conversation going. We cannot let
Right.
this
That's right.
conversation go by the wayside.
That's right.
So, with that, thank you again for hanging out with me. And I think my guys are coming, but if they don't, we could rock it out for this time. We'll be
We
fine.
got this. We got it.
So, and going back, and we're talking about time, I was like, well, the election really isn't until November 2024, right? The big,
Right.
what we call the big election or whatever. What most of us, and until we get a little retrained and more educated, we'll learn that all of them are big elections.
Correct.
um, and I was thinking, I was like, hmm, are we doing this too early? Are we having this conversation too soon? Even when I did my social media post, I'm like, are y'all ready for election? And I'm like, or is it too early to tell? Is it too early to talk about? And so, in talking about how time flies by, if we don't talk about it now, before we know it, it'll be upon us, and then we'll
Yep.
be like, well,
Yep.
who am I voting for?
Yep.
If we
All
don't
true.
start talking about it now.
All
And
true.
it's so crazy because a lot of times, I know for me, I don't watch the news. I try to stay informed, but I just can't sit down and watch the news. A lot of times it's just so much bad news. I just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you do tend to miss some of the things that you should kind of, know. And so I try to do something in that regard, is whether it's like I have a subscription to Sybil Wilkes. She says,
Okay.
be empowered. She has a weekly or a day, no, actually it's a daily little newsletter, and her most of her stuff is about things that affect the African American community. So I'm like,
Okay.
okay, let me do that. Or I'll do I listen to even though he's a comedian, I think his mind is kind of on the brilliant side. It's
Yeah.
DLU.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the way he explains some of the things that he talks about. I'm like, wow, I never really thought about it like that, but that's a way to look at it. And they talk about a lot of stuff on their show. So sometimes I'll listen to
Correct.
that. Every now and then I'll turn on CNN and see what's going on, or you just kind of hear different stuff here and there. And if I hear something, I'm like, okay, I really need to look at this. So I'll Google it or whatever. But to say that we really do need to, and I've become more cognizant of the fact that when I get ready to vote, I need to know who I'm voting for, and not just, okay, I'm gonna just vote Democrat,
Correct.
or I'm just gonna vote for all the black people.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I respect that.
I'm just saying. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I
I
did not
respect
do
that.
no whole lot of research. I just voted Obama.
I respect
because
that.
Mostly because his wife looked like me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mostly because of that. So I want us to get to a place which I'm learning to get to, a place where I am actually voting for someone and not just against something I don't want.
Correct.
So, in saying that, the first thing that I was thinking about in this process, if Biden decides to run for reelection, is that like a automatically sealed kind of thing? Do the Democrats just get behind him and say, this is our candidate? Or do other candidates still get to kind of throw their hat in the ring? So I was looking at something that's like two candidates are still on the Democratic side, are like, we want to, challenge or whatever, I guess would be the word, I think.
Yeah. So he has officially filed for reelection. The president
Okay.
has.
I think I saw that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's officially filed, and as of right now, he is running as the lone Democrat. Um, and the literature they've been releasing has him and Kamala Harris running together for reelection, because there's been speculation by some whether or not he should keep her as his running mate or not. He
Mm.
has been publicly defensive of her, and his literature has had Biden Harris running together. Now, that does not mean that other potential Democratic candidates cannot file to run. They can do that. He has to still go through the normal process, as does the Republicans, right? You still have to win your party's nomination
Mm.
going into the primary, and so you could see others decide to file to run. Now, what's interesting on Democratic side, because right now the Democrats occupy the White House, is um, you know I don't know who else would be daring enough to run against the incumbent president,
Mm.
unless they have some inside information that we don't have that makes them um, pressed to run. And so,
Mm-hmm.
barring unforeseen circumstance, whether it be health, whether it be some illegal conduct, I don't know who else would be daring enough to run in that regard. Now, if you look at polling, there's polling out there that has President Biden, able to win re-election against former President Trump and or newly filed candidate Ron DeSantis. And
Mm.
so Biden appears to be the strongest option the Democrats have to retain the White House. But again, to your question, it does not prohibit anyone from filing to run the Democratic side. You rarely, if at all, see that take place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
according to this, though, there are actually two people who have, I guess, what they call declared.
yeah,
It's Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
yeah,
Mariana Williamson and a Robert
yeah.
F. Kennedy Jr.
And the fact
that
that I didn't
have.
know that should tell you something. And I'm not saying I'm
Oh,
like
I
the
just something
end
you
all
didn't
be
know.
all. Yeah, but see, I'm not saying the end all be all, but it's just one of those things, right, where you're left to wonder. Now, here's the thing. Let me give you a good example of
Hmm.
this is not on equal level, but it's just like a strategy. When Congressman Al Lawson ran for Congress several years ago, everybody remembers at the time that he was running, his seat had kind of been redrawn, and the Tallahassee area seat was lumped into the Jacksonville seat,
Mm,
and the incumbent of that seat was Congresswoman Corinne Brown. If you remember,
mm,
she was going through federal allegations and then a federal indictment. And Al Lawson filed a run for Congress. And I would argue he filed a run less against Corinne Brown and more for the speculation the seat was going to be wide open because she was going to end up being in federal custody, was kind of the assumption. So he ran. No one else filed to run. He got a lot of flack that he would run against the incumbent who had kind of been the godmother of that seat.
mm-hmm,
And he ran. Ultimately, she was unable to complete the race because of the federal charges against her. Al Lawson ultimately wins the seat. He becomes the congressman from Tallahassee to Jacksonville, and he got a lot of flack. Some of that flack was because he ran against the godmother. The other one was because he had enough in him to do it. Others did not, and they were kind of jealous about it.
mm,
Small example, not an equal comparison. But the point is that when you have people run against the presumptive nominee, you're running because you are anticipating something opening up that gives you a chance
mm-hmm.
to get in there. Again, let's not ignore elephant in the room for President Biden is his health,
He
right?
is
Can he
80
withstand?
years old.
Exactly. Can he withstand a full election season? I mean, we can go back to President Obama when he entered into office. I remember his hair being mostly black with some sprinkle of salt.
It was jet
Right.
black and wasn't no
Exactly.
sprinkle.
Okay. Then there it is, jet black. And then
Year one,
you look
sprinkles.
at it by the end of the first term. I mean, he was already whiting, and by the end of the second term, he was completely white. That job's stressful, let
Yeah.
alone major on your health. And so, Biden says that he is healthy enough to endure another election season. But I mean, the top two people from both parties are him and Trump, and Trump's upper 70s as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Trump is 76
yeah. So he'll
and
be
Biden is 80.
77. He'll be 77 by the time of the election if he makes it all the
Yeah.
way to the end.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I'm really, it's still my mind is boggled that he's a viable candidate. Period. I'm still not over that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he done been president and not. And
Yeah.
I'm still like, how did
Yeah.
that happen?
Yep. Yep. We should talk
How did
about that too.
that happen? That just don't make no sense to me. I'm like, y'all. I'm just gonna run for president. How about that? How about I just be president?
You are legally qualified.
Isn't that interesting though? Because there is no, like, we don't look at a resume. It's harder to get a regular job almost than it is qualification wise
Mm-hmm.
than to be president of the United
Mm-hmm.
States. What
Mm-hmm.
is it? Natural born citizen
Yep.
and 35 and above?
At least 35, and you've been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years.
Yeah. Oh, so you don't have to be a natural born citizen.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I mean,
Oh, did
listen,
they change that?
you need to be. I mean, the traditional way is you need to be a natural born citizen and be at least 35 years of age,
Okay.
right? But some have argued and that as long as you've been a resident for 14 straight years. Now, I'm not in the camp of arguing for that. I'm in the camp of natural born citizen, and at least 35 years is not up for dispute. Not up for dispute at all. And I can't even. I don't know who I can point to. I mean, I give you an example of well, no, that wouldn't be a good example because Obama was born in America. He was born in Hawaii, which is America. So I don't
Yeah.
have an example of anybody who was not a natural born citizen
Natural
who
born
ran
citizen.
for president.
Mm-hmm.
So the traditional way is natural born citizen, at least 35 years of age.
And Obama was the youngest.
Well, I don't know. I gotta remember how old John F. Kennedy was.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember. Kennedy was pretty young as well. Yeah,
But even at 35 seems young.
Yeah. I mean, right now, so you think about, if you look at it from the Republican side, Governor DeSantis is 44,
Right.
right? I can't remember how old Tim Scott is, but there are several on the Republican side that are considered young. I mean, what's interesting is Governor DeSantis's age, historically was usually in that range when you ran
So
for president.
Tim Scott is 57.
Okay, he older than I thought he was. But like 44 was usually, it was a safe number. I mean, it's really been the last few elections. You can go back to George H.W. Bush, Clinton, all them. They were in that 50 range. But I mean, I never foresaw seeing a person win office in their 70s. I mean, the oldest president prior to Biden was Ronald Reagan. Right? Reagan entered in, but Reagan had also had a full life in the entertainment industry of acting before he even entered into politics. He was the eldest elected president, and now you look at Biden, right?
And
So
he wasn't even that great of an actor, according to my mama. And now he the president of the United States.
Right. So you look at it from that standpoint. I mean, you have a lot of them who had previous lives before they even got into the political arena. Then you have people like President Biden, who was a long-serving elected politician. So this is the America we're in right now, right? Where I mean, you can look at it from a Congress, Lisa. Our congressional leaders, right? The minority leader in the Senate, former Speaker Pelosi. You look at the current majority leader in the Senate. You look at some of your vocal, especially on the Senate side, some of your vocal Democrat or Republican people, they're all in their 70s, some of them are in their 80s, right? And it's just absolutely interesting to see, the I don't want to call them leaders, but I guess the leaders of our country are in their 70s and early 80s.
And you would think that we could trust the elders in that way, but
yeah, I mean, for me, it's the unwillingness to let go, because at the end of the day, that's where the power lies, right? When you secure power, you're unable or even unwilling to relinquish the power, especially from a political perspective, right? You look at it right now in the battle with the debt ceiling. They have to get to some kind of agreement by Wednesday of next week if they don't want to basically shut down government. and it requires you to get along and kind of get some kind of agreement. But it's you can make any effective president ineffective based on how Congress is made up. If you go back to President Obama, you go back to President Bush, right? President Bush, when he first entered into office, he entered into a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate. So his first 4 years, his first term, everything he wanted to get done, he got done. And I don't think he vetoed anything his first year. Maybe he may have vetoed one or two things, but I can't even think of the two things he did. And you look at it from Obama's standpoint, he was a Democratic president with a Republican House and Senate, right? And so it makes it challenging. You look at Biden now. I mean, he has one side, doesn't have the other side, and so in those regards, you to the unintelligent everyday person, unintelligent from a political standpoint, they wonder why isn't he doing anything, and don't realize that presidents don't pass laws, right? So Congress can just play games with all your stuff, and just you can finish 4 years and haven't got nothing done.
Right.
That's kind of what we see.
That's the craziest thing. Yeah. That is the craziest thing. Yeah. I think that is one of the things that, I know my responsibility for voting and things like that, but that is one of the things that kind of puts me in this place of, I really don't like this, because it doesn't seem like these are the people who are fighting for me, for how I live. It's like, it seems really selfish a lot of times. And it seems like, I'm just not going to let you be great. Like Obama probably could have did so much more. And our world could have been so much better. But because of who you are, I'm just not going to let you be great. I don't care what your idea is.
Yeah. It's a lot more probably was done and just also not communicated well. But I think for anyone who's listening, it is, you can look at it from any level of government, right? It's local, statewide, federal, whomever you are endorsing, whomever you are supporting, whoever you're going to vote for, you have to allow yourself enough room to accept the reality that he or she will not bat 1,000 when it comes to their agenda. There's going to be some blockage as to what they want to get done, because you look at it from a local standpoint, a county commissioner, city commissioner, they're one vote amongst others, right? You look at it from a governor can say, I want the following things. They still got to be able to work with their legislature. You look at it from a federal standpoint, the president has to be able to work with Congress and the Senate, like you have to. And when we're looking at it from an election standpoint, this is why these conversations are always important, because a lot of people just don't understand the dynamic of the three branches of government and how laws are passed and all those type of things. And so you put a lot of frustration, indictment upon the person you endorse. They didn't do enough. And there are some now who make a lot of promises. They overpromise and underdeliver. That is absolutely true. When you look at it from the federal standpoint, it's almost like Washington is equal to this dysfunction. There's an unwillingness to get anything done. Like this debt ceiling, my prediction has been they will get a deal done, right? They'll get a deal done at the last minute, but the deal's not going to be a permanent. It's going to probably be some kind of, they'll agree upon some extension, a 6-month extension that gets them basically to the end of the year type of situation. And then they'll all go home and recess, and they'll come back, and then we'll find ourselves in October, November, same situation all over again. That's kind of what they've done the last few times. But you do this, right, because both sides are locked into what their platform needs to be. You watch Fox News, the Republicans are winning. You watch CNN, the Democrats are winning. It's crazy to set the debt ceiling. And then they have to hold fast in that regard. But listen, they're not going to long-term allow the federal government to shut down. They're not going to send federal employees home. They're going to make sure you still get your mail, all that type of stuff. But the drama is necessary, but it all equates to this function. And what used to be able to get done in simple conversations is now literally a divide. I talked to some former federal elected officials years ago, and they were saying, as much as it was portrayed on TV, this was probably back in the 90s, early 2000s when they were serving, was it started on TV of this dysfunction, they actually genuinely were friends when the cameras were off. They would go and have a beer together or play softball together or cars together. Today in DC, I've been told people who I know who live, work, and even serve in DC, there is a genuine dislike and distrust amongst
Oh,
Democrats and Republicans, right? And so while they may have bickered and fought back in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, they would still go have a burger together. Now, these guys literally have a hatred toward each other, and that hatred spills over to just their debate and everything else. And they're absolutely content with getting as little as possible. Remember, from a Republican strategy standpoint, the less you allow Biden to get done, the more you can define him as an ineffective president.
mm-hmm.
And that's the strategy, right? And and if you're just a normal person who checks in and out ever so often, you're frustrated with Biden's inability to get anything done. You're not understanding that's a strategy played against him.
Mm-hmm.
From a Republican standpoint, if you render him ineffective, then you can come in and make the argument of, boom, this guy has done absolutely nothing. It goes back to when Carter was president, right? Ronald Reagan asked that one genuine question: is, are you better off 4 years later?
Mm.
And American people looked around and said, actually, we're not. That's really what made
Yeah.
Reagan become even more prominent, is they had 4 years of Carter and realized we are not better off 4 years later. We want something different. And that's kind of where things are. Now we'll go further in. I'm sure about the candidates themselves and what they bring to the table. But that when the Republican strategy is make Biden look ineffective, and by doing that, you now can pose that same question to today's voters, and ask that question. And it's interesting to watch this stuff play out. Also, there was a time where when you ran for president, prior to President Trump, you had to run closer to the middle, right? You couldn't be polarizing. You had to close to the middle. Trump is really the first presidential candidate, at least in my lifetime, who ran one way. Now, he ventured over in some areas to the middle, absolutely, but really ran a very strong right wing candidacy all the way through, and to his base, and it worked out. Normally, you got to be way more middle of the road when you're running for president, because you're trying to get the independent vote, right? You're trying to get the flip vote, and you can't be a stout one way or another. We're not seeing that now. We're seeing now some candidates, they're going to run 100% party. They're going to run 100% platform and distrust that the outcome is going to be favorable to them. And we need to understand when we research candidates that some of them are not going to run to the middle. They're going to run 100% right, or maybe even left, and then just kind of, trust that the American voting population now is going to align with that. And that's the one thing about Trump's supporters. They're loyal, man. You
They
mentioned earlier
are.
about believing to the nominee. They're loyal, and they don't tolerate disloyalty.
They loyal to the point of what, the insurrection.
And prison time, right? As a result. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We just take our chances.
In the church vernacular, right? Trump sent out a clarion call and they all responded. And some of them are now being sentenced to go to federal prison, but he called it out and they came. They're just loyal,
And
man.
it's I'm like, this is bananas. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
But I think too is maybe some of this just kind of had to come up. I mean, it was never really, we never, to me, have ever been in a post-racial society. Never. We have never gotten there. But I think that now it's like just this whole free for all, that we are really a country that is divided.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm looking for a candidate that is trying to bring the people back together. But with what you just said, it's like some of them are like, we don't want to be together. You either come on our side, or that's just it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy. But the
Mm-hmm.
Republicans have like, let's see, what did this thing say? They have one, two, three, four. They have about 10 people,
Yeah.
8 who have declared, and 2 who might still.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be interesting. But more than likely, it's going to be Trump. Is is what you're thinking?
Well, I'm not gonna say that, right? So you're right. There's a lot. Let's do some history here, right?
It is a lot.
When President Trump ran the first time for president, right? I think it's important for everybody to remember when he won in 2016. He at one point he was one of 17, I believe, nominees.
It was a lot.
Right? You remember some of the debates? They literally had 2 rows of people up
Mhm,
there, which
mhm,
again, that by itself was amazing to experience. That was never the situation, right? You may sometimes have 3 to 4, never that many.
mhm,
Look at it from that standpoint, some of whom never had a chance to win, right? But they had up to that point. You look at it from a math standpoint, that math worked out ideally for Trump, right? Now you're not running
mhm,
against a just one other, you're running
mhm,
against 16. And at
mhm,
that point, all you gotta do is just begin to be loud in the room, get your message across, and begin to pick them off one by one.
mhm,
President Trump's argument has been publicly that all media is good media, even if he's being written around. For example, his situation in New York, right? Situation in Georgia, all of that is, although it looks back from a legal perspective, it keeps him in, it keeps his name in on your
mhm,
mouth, it keeps his face in front of the camera, and you utilize that. And the more he is indicted or accused of things in states, the more his base um, gets cements themselves further in because they look at it as unfair treatment, right?
mhm.
You have a lot of nominees. I will submit to you, Lisa, in the viewing audience that no one should take for granted Governor Ron DeSantis. No one. And here's why I say that. Number one is because from a dollars and cents standpoint, he has the money to be in the fight
Mm,
to the end.
mm,
Money is major. He has
mhm,
done a really good job of fundraising. So number one, he has the money, and he has money that others minus Trump do not have. And so at some
mhm,
point, the other nominees are going to have a hard time fundraising because where they will go to get money from, Trump and or DeSantis has already been to those wells and have drawn from those wells. Number one.
mm, mhm,
Number two, he has a platform where success has been enjoyed. The governor, no matter how you view him, has had a lot of successes here in Florida. You can call it polarizing. I will call it polarizing to an extent, but it gives him a platform to run upon, which there are individuals who will align with that level of thinking. Number two. Number three is he has established, so it seems, a spine to go against Trump. Whereas the
mm,
other nominees who have gotten in are doing all they can not to say one negative word about Trump. DeSantis
mhm.
has no problem going right at him, which you have to do if you really want to be deemed important. Number four, and I think this is important, is DeSantis is young, right? He is by far the youngest
Yeah,
nominee in the race. Well, no, he's not the youngest nominee, second youngest nominee, because there's a guy, um, Vivek. I can't even say
yeah.
his name. He's an
Vivek
entrepreneur.
Ram Rasami or something like that.
Yeah, so he's 37, right?
Yeah.
And DeSantis is 44. But DeSantis has it. And then fifth, and I think is important, is some of the people in the groups that were 100% behind Trump in 2016 have jumped from Trump and gotten behind DeSantis. They look at him as equal to Trump without the drama. And so
Mm,
I think the polling right now has Trump with a clear front runner lead that's very comfortable. Absolutely. So there's a lot of ground for DeSantis to make up, and his team needs to work hard to make it up. I know some people who are on his team. I don't know how they do things on a national level. I know from a statewide level, those guys have great success. This is now big boy league, right? It's a lot different.
mhm,
But the one thing that's going to be the biggest test for Governor DeSantis, in my opinion, is how is he going to maneuver and or withstand the direct, nonstop attacks of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, listen, dysfunction works for him. He has no problem attacking you publicly,
none
privately.
whatsoever.
all of those type of things. How is he going to withstand that? Because the unwillingness to acknowledge what he's doing towards you, the unwillingness to take him on head on, is not a long-term strategy that's going to work. You're going to have to say his name. You're going to have to go at him strong. You're going to have to be willing to accept the fact that there's going to be some people who are literally going to deem you disloyal and therefore never vote for you. And I think right now the strategy is not to acknowledge what he's doing. And I think, there are going to be certain people you're going to have to try to win over. And so right now, I think the mindset is run to win the nomination and then at some point venture over. And if you look at it from a gubernatorial standpoint, that's kind of what happened, right? When he first ran for governor, he ran to win the nomination. Trump tweeted, it helped him out greatly. Once he won the nomination, he then ventured over to the middle. And so people who were concerned about him ultimately got excited toward the end, like, okay, this actually going to be he'll be a great governor for us. He'll govern toward the middle. When he initially won office, he kind of did that. And all of a sudden, he started venturing back to the right side of things. But I think he is, of the list of people who've currently filed, I think some good people have filed to run, but I think DeSantis is really the only major person. DeSantis' words to his donor base is, there's only 3 people that can win president: Biden, Trump, and myself, is what he's saying. And he's saying that he's the only one of him and Trump that can actually beat Biden. Now, the polling right now will differ from that. The polling will say neither him nor Trump can beat Biden, right? And so let's remember also, we're in May. A lot's going to transpire. Just the next 60 days, a lot's going to transpire, meaning others are going to get into the race. You're going to now experience more. The biggest thing I think for DeSantis that I think really we are going to witness publicly is how will he handle not just Trump, how is he going to handle national media? Because he really hadn't been tested, right? Here in Florida, he's all but blackballed the media. So how's he going to handle that national media that's deemed credible when they're coming at you nonstop? CNN, right, Fox News, MSNBC, other news outlets. They're coming at you and pointing out various things about you that people don't know anything about. How are you going to withstand that? Because you can't just say that's woke media. You got to be able to respond to that stuff.
And he is not, I don't want to, just don't seem that smart to me. I don't know.
He's deemed to be a more disciplined Donald Trump.
Sure, right? Sure. Now that I definitely see that they could probably control him a little bit, which they thought they was going to do to Trump, but
exactly. You're saying no way. Right. Exactly. They thought they
was going to be able to do that.
Trump, like, no,
I don't know how they thought it, but they thought they was going to be able to control him.
No, that ain't going to happen. If anything, the more flamboyant, the more combative Trump is. What Trump did really well, and I'm not endorsing this at all, I want to be clear, but one thing he did really well is he created a great awakening of an electorate that had been asleep for a long time. And and you can call it the racist whites, whatever it may be, but he woke up people who had not voted in years, who just kind of just checked out. He gave them a voice. And those individuals are now in a situation where they're going to rebel against any notion of them going back.
They felt empowered.
All of that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's his loyal base now. They're going to stay locked in with him.
Yeah.
The group that really has jumped from Trump, that's now looking at DeSantis, you'll love this, is the white evangelicals. Right. The white evangelicals swore by Trump. Some even went as far as said that he was God's man for the country. I knew of some white national evangelical.
That was Paula White, wasn't it?
Paula White. You had a lot of them in the Southern Baptists, right? They were all locked in on Trump, that he was God's person. And then they've now ventured.
I never remember Trump even declaring to be a Christian.
Let's remember this. This is important. For anyone who's listening to Darrick McGhee, I want to make it very clear when you ask the question, why would anybody want to vote Republican as an example? Here is why. This is the biggest thing for most Republicans, or even Democrats, right? But as who's a Republican base, I've seen this before. The biggest thing is Supreme Court. One can argue that whomever wins president November of next year will probably have the ability to appoint between 1 to 3 new Supreme Court justices in that
Mm.
first term, in the first term, right? That's a big deal when you think about, look at it from a Republican perspective, is being able to associate that. Lisa, let me give you a quick example. When I worked in government, before I went private sector, when Rick Scott was running for re-election in 2014, there was not a poll you would have saw that had him leading against Charlie Crist. If anything, he was getting embarrassingly destroyed in every poll. There were Republicans, I will not name them, who hated Rick Scott, just did not like the guy at all. But during the election season, they got on the bus with him and went and campaigned throughout Florida with him. And here is why. Because the belief was whoever won the presidency whoever won the governor's office in 2014 would be able to appoint 1 to 2 Supreme Court justices. Florida Supreme Court justices. And that's why it became a really big deal. And so ultimately, Republicans who hated Rick Scott swallowed their hatred for him and said, I want to campaign with him, because this was their words. I'd rather have a Republican as governor for Supreme Court versus a Democrat. And that's where it becomes very important. And a lot of times people who go vote, they're not seeing it from a judiciary standpoint, looking at the here and now. Strategists are looking at it from a Supreme Court perspective and saying, okay, who do we want to be at the helm to be able to have Supreme Court justice appointments to be done? And that's kind of where things are right now.
Wow.
And so that's critically important. You're looking at the voting thing. And a lot of times, Lisa, when you look at your ballot, most people never even research the judicial appointments or individuals on the ballot. We just kind of just circle in and move on. And then you look at it, these individuals are ultimately making decisions on who goes to prison, who stays in prison, right? Who's going to be the ones enforcing the laws when the governor gets a bill that he really wants to pass and it gets appealed and ultimately in front of the Supreme Court. The makeup of that court is going to matter as to whether that law gets thrown out or not get thrown out. And we got to start thinking about that. There are 3 branches of government, not 2. Judiciary is very important. And that's going to matter in this race right here for president.
And so while we are kind of in this, like, if you don't know, or you might have learned it and you forgot it. Everybody took social studies and civics and all of that. But as much as we say the Supreme Court, we don't vote on them, they're not supposed to be swayed by the politics of it all. But just them getting into the Supreme Court is political.
It's political.
Whether we as a people vote on them,
100%.
But it is very political.
Yeah,
I never really understood that until did President Obama try to appoint somebody and then they didn't let him?
That's happened to him.
Like that.
It's happened to him. It happened to there's been the people that Biden suggested, at least there was somebody being hinted at and they were being vetted that ultimately bowed out. But yeah, absolutely. Because here's the thing. Every current Supreme Court justice and every future Supreme Court justice, barring any change to the structure, has to be nominated by the sitting president. And then once that's done, they go through a vetting process. But ultimately, they have to survive Senate confirmation. And that's where the makeup of the Senate matters. If you are a Democratic president and you make an appointment to the Supreme Court, but your Senate is Republican, they're going to do all they can not to get your person across the finish, right? And so you think about that. You think about when Biden ran, he said, if I win, the country will have its very first Black female Supreme Court justice. And it proved to be true. But if we all remember what we witnessed as far as what she went through in confirmation, and now imagine what you're going through in any confirmation, you really get grilled. But you got to then add to this being a Black woman, and now every facial expression is going to be judged, right? Every response to a question is going to be judged. Now you got to put the camera in front of her husband's face. She has a white husband. Her daughter is biracial, right? She can't show any emotion, any retaliatory behavior, everything is being scrutinized even
Mm-hmm.
more than her colleagues on the bench. All of this is being done, and kudos to her, right? Because she withstood it all, and
She
she
did.
made all of her responses based on the law, which it ought to be. You're ultimately supposed to be questioning them based upon their legal standings and their viewing of the U.S. Constitution, so on and so forth, not based on anything else. You look at their legal upbringing and their law school thing. All that stuff is allowed, but as
Mm-hmm.
far as the texture of her hair, and whether her husband's black or white, and whether she drives a Tesla or a minivan, none of that stuff matters. Doesn't have nothing to do with how you going to ultimately rule when you're on the bench. And yet all that became a factor in her
Right.
race, in
Right.
her appointment, because she was the first black female.
Mm-hmm.
But Biden said, I'm going to make this happen. And they did all they could. And under normal circumstances, Lisa, somebody else probably would say, you know what, I'm not putting up with this. I bow out. And she withstood, and she should have. But the Supreme Court is important, and don't let anybody be fooled. When a president is nominating somebody for the Supreme Court, that person has you're not going to appoint anybody or nominate anybody that does not have political leanings similar to yours. May not be 100% ideal, but similar to
Mm-hmm.
yours.
Mm-hmm.
I will give public kudos to Governor Bush. When Governor Bush came into office, if you remember, Lawton Childs died early. Lawton Childs had nominated a couple of people for Supreme Court. One was now retired Justice Peggy Quince. She was his nominee. And Jeb Bush could have blocked it because he had now become governor, and he honored that appointment. He honored that nomination, and he became a
Mm-hmm.
Supreme Court justice because she was a nominee and appointment by Lawton Childs, outgoing governor, who died 2.5 weeks before his term expired. And Bush honored that. He didn't have to, but he did. That's rare.
Mm-hmm.
And because
Mm-hmm.
once you get on the Supreme Court, you're on there really to death,
Yeah.
right? That matters. But the Supreme Court will play a major role, especially on the Republican side of things. And then ultimately in this race, you will start hearing Trump and DeSantis and even Biden. They're all going to start talking about the Supreme Court makeup. You need me on the bench. You need me as president, to do these things. And we got to look at it from that lens. But I tell anybody, don't sleep on Ron DeSantis. I know he's untested, but he has the money to get his message out.
Woo! If he run the
As I sit
US of
right here,
A like he
yeah.
run Florida, we is in trouble.
Well, Lisa, his campaign slogan is make America Florida. Right. His whole platform for running is what he's done the last 5.5 years in Florida. That's what his base. That's his platform is. He's going to point to things that he get done in Florida. And as much as it may be hard for some people to tolerate, there are people who are wanting to copy and paste those things in other states.
Isn't that something? And the crazy part is, I think I read this or heard it was the NAACP has put out something
Yeah.
saying don't move to Florida.
Yeah. A travel advisory was released by the National NAACP, saying do not come to Florida. It's not safe for Black people. And then the Florida NAACP weighed in as well. And then as recently as yesterday, so right now the Florida legislature is made up of 4 Black Republicans, first time in history. There are 3 Black Republicans in the House, and there's 1 in the Senate, which is Corey Simon. The 3 in the House are representatives. Representative Webster Barnaby. I'm sorry, Representative Webster Barnaby. I keep saying it wrong. Webster Barnaby, Bernie Jacques, and Keon Michaels. She is the lone Black Republican female. The 3 in the House did a joint letter, ultimately countering the NAACP travel advisory, saying that Black people, you are safe here. We're the example that you are safe here. But they did a travel advisory saying it's unsafe based on Ron DeSantis' way of governing and these laws that are passed that, is basically You're coming here at your own risk. Yeah, and Corey Simon, of course, just for the record, he did not sign on to that joint letter. I want to make sure I don't give that false impression that he did when I mentioned it's 4 Black Republicans, but the three in the House have done a joint letter to counter that. But yeah, that's a major step, right? Even Dana Young, who's the president and CEO of Visit Florida, she's also come out recently to counter that as well, because Florida thrives on tourism.
On tourism.
Right. And so when something like that comes out, that could ultimately affect your tourism. But what's interesting about that, Lisa, we have to address it, is Governor DeSantis' fight with Disney. In Disney World, I would argue, is the largest generator of tourism in Florida. Right. And so you go out to Disney, you start affecting tourism as well. But all of these things factor in. But the governor's slogan is "Make America Florida." And which I think now is going to open him up to a lot of scrutiny. He really, the thing I will say about Governor DeSantis, as a guy who is around politics, is he really is untested as it relates, especially on a national scale, right? Because when the press didn't write what he wanted them to write, he basically blackballed them from press conference. Some people have argued and things of that nature. So now that he's on this national scale, even last night when he did his rollout on Twitter and it didn't go well, instantly it was nationally being talked about, and he was the joke. Now you can spin it one or two ways. You can spin it as there was so much interest that he broke Twitter, right? The system couldn't handle it. Or you can argue that he's not ready for mainstream. However you look at it, as soon as that took place, national media, from bloggers to print press, all began to write their stories. And that's the difference now when you get to the big boy leagues. Everything you do, if you do a press conference and you don't shake hands with people, all that's going to be criticized. And the question is, can he withstand all of that criticism?
Well, I mean, we already had the one that always threw temper tantrums to me.
But it worked.
It did, didn't it?
And it's still working.
And this is the crazy part for me. I'm like, are we grown or what?
It worked, and it's still working.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Honestly, what I'm waiting to see, and I don't know if I'll see it, but what I'm waiting to see is all of this rolled out in reality TV. I'm trying to tell you, it's gonna be a show. When I was president.
Yeah. What I'm interested in seeing is, so right now, for all those who are listening, there are at least 7 more potential Republican nominees to jump in. Republican candidates to jump in, at least 7 right now. It may not get the full 7, but you still have at least 7 that are being considered. And I will give people, one of the people is Chris Sununu, who is the current governor of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a major player in when you are a Republican nominee, right? And so what he's going to do, is Mike Pence going to get in the race, right? Is the Virginia governor going to get in the race? There's other individuals. But what's going to be the biggest thing is when you finally get Trump and DeSantis on the debate stage, on the same platform, what does that look like? That's going to be your first real theater, right? Because Trump is not going to abide by the rules of debate.
He is not.
He proved that before. And he is personally committed to attacking DeSantis every chance he gets.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. When Tim Scott got in, Trump tweeted and said, "I welcome Tim Scott to a race. He's a great American. He's definitely better than Ron dysfunctional," whatever he said, right? He is instantly attacking. When the thing happened last night with Twitter, Trump instantly came out attacking DeSantis. He is locked in. But what that also tells you, at least what it tells me, is that the Trump camp deems DeSantis the biggest threat.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah.
And so for those who are,
this little mix does say, Chris Sununu, who'd you just say?
Sununu or something like that.
Sununu, yeah.
I call him Sununu.
And it's a whole bunch of others on here. Pence is likely, they say.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be crazy again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I hope that I don't know, Joe. I don't know, Joe. Oh, Joe.
But I would tell you, there's two things I want to say to our listeners. And I think since if you get nothing else that I said tonight, the first thing I'll say is to the level of your tolerance, stay informed and stay engaged.
Mhm.
Again, to the level of
Yeah.
your tolerance, right? Like don't become so enamored by CNN and Fox News every day, all day, but enough to be able to educate yourself on
Mhm.
who's in the race and what they're campaigning on. That's very, very important. Number one. And number two, understanding how old our current president is. Um, all polls have him um, not only the clear nominee for the Democrats, but ultimately, winning a second term. And I mean, some polls even have it as if it comes down to a rematch between him and Trump, that Biden will win re-election, right? Which is where another reason why DeSantis becomes more desirable for some Republicans. They feel like he's the only one of the nominees that actually can only knock Trump off, but actually give them a real chance of regaining the White House. But the polls you're looking at, that there are people who are the polls are showing that Biden is really in line to get a second term. Again, barring the unforeseen, right? Again, his health is a major
Mhm.
unknown, but I can't point to any Democrat right now that if they were to jump in the race can attract enough momentum and excitement that people will want to put them in the White House.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you
Now,
talking about 81 and then 85 if he make it all the way through.
yeah,
That that's well,
yeah,
my
yeah,
grandma 90 something, and she's still, doing her thing. So I can't.
yeah,
I guess it's
yeah,
possible.
yeah, yeah.
Oh
Very
gosh.
much so. Very much so.
So what would you what else is that may is are we voting on in the presidential? Is it just
So,
because we don't do senators or anything like that, right?
well, so based on how our Constitution is set up, our congressional members, they're up every 2 years, right? So
Oh, okay.
Congress is up every 2 years. So your congressional member, wherever you are, they will be up. They will be on the ballot. Most of them will probably run unopposed, but they'll
Mm,
be on the ballot in 2024. Again, the big ticket item, of course, is the president, right? This is that
mhm,
presidential. So there are people who normally don't vote in the midterm that will vote in the presidential. You have your congressional seats that are on there. There'll be some areas of our country where you will have some senators just based on the staggering of their seats. You will
mm,
have some senators, for example, Governor Scott. Well, now Senator Scott, he's going to be on the ballot in 24, right?
mm,
And so, and that's why I mean they've had rumors where the Democrats are trying to get people like Dwayne Wade or Grant Hill to file to run, right? They're desperately trying to find someone. But here's the thing: go for the state of Florida Democrats. This is where the problem with Democrats is: they just don't do a good job of recruiting or maintaining a caliber of a bench that's worthy of serious consideration when it comes to running.
mhm.
When you're now reaching for Dwayne Wade to
So
run
you just
against Rick
looking
Scott.
for famous face, recognizable people.
Exactly. So ultimately, for me, what I'm looking at and saying is you basically are going to forfeit the seat again, right? There used to be a time where no matter who the majority party was, the minority party was going to find someone to want to run against you in every seat so that you didn't just coast in. So you're
Mhm,
going to have congressional on the ballot, but also you're going to have your state legislature by way of the House of Representatives. They have to
mhm.
run every 2 years as well, so they'll be on the ballot as well. Then your local stuff as well. And this is why all this is important because top of the ticket always plays a role down ballot.
Yeah.
So there will be people who are going to be voting in 2024 that did not vote in 2022,
Mhm.
right? And so now they're going to factor in majorly, which is why Trump being at the top of the ballot, for example, if he's a Republican nominee, he's going to matter to the other Republicans on that ballot, because if he's a nominee and people are decide to be disengaged, that's going to affect them in the down ballot races on whether or not they can get a good turnout, right? Same thing
Right.
with Biden in that regard. I think Democrats, in my opinion, I think Democratic voters have already accepted the fact that Biden's going to be the Democratic nominee, and they're either happy about it or they're okay with it. So it's not going to see, in my opinion, a major um, ding against the Democrats. They kind of accepted that he's going to be their nominee. The Republican side is going to be very, very interesting. If it's Trump, will you have some of your middle of the road Republicans vote for Biden or don't vote at all, right? If it's DeSantis, what does that look like as well? And I think everybody else who's running, as much as they may be good individuals, I think they're ultimately running to be formidable enough to be considered for a VP candidate, right? Which is kind of what happened with Kamala. Kamala ran for president. She did a really good job for president. And those who didn't know her got a chance to see her on a national scale. Next thing you know, Biden looked at her as vice president. I have a hard time looking at most of these people who are buying the run and saying that they have a really good chance of becoming president of the United States. I think Ron DeSantis is the only person other than Donald Trump that has a legit chance of being a candidate. And I'm not saying that because he's our governor. I'm saying that because, of a lot of factors. I mean, the governor has governed preparing to run for president. So
the whole time that's he been preparing for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so with that, we are about 18 months away.
18 months away. And that time, I talked about earlier with my kids, right? Goes by really fast. You're going to look up and going to realize, okay, because actually the turn of the new year, you start having those early states, New Hampshires and Iowa's, all those states will become very important. And so that'll happen early, but campaigns in full swing now.
Yeah.
And some people will stand through this year, and start falling off after a while because they won't be able to raise the money. And some of them will raise the money. But I mean, I think all polling's going to show Trump, then DeSantis. I don't foresee Governor DeSantis overtaking Trump in the foreseeable future in the polls. But I do expect and believe that he's going to be formidable and in striking distance in every poll. And so if he goes from, let's say he's at 33 right now, for an example, if he goes up to 35 in the next poll, that can be deemed as he's gaining momentum, right? If he gets to 37 again, it's everything that is upward in a poll is showing him gaining momentum, which ultimately means that there are people who are buying into his candidacy and they're not sold on Trump anymore. But ultimately, he's going to have to be able to win some of those early states to really win people over. And, that's going to really matter. And I think Trump's camp, they need to run as if he's not the nominee. If they get content and lazy that he's the nominee, it's going to backfire on them. Because at the end of the day, it's Trump's to win, right? DeSantis basically has to run his way to try to win people over, but Trump has to seal the deal. He can't assume that it's sealed. He has to seal the deal. And that money that DeSantis has is going to make it very hard for him to seal the deal. So we're going to see real live dysfunction on TV every day, my friend.
We are.
Every day.
Forget reality TV. It's for real. It's our every day. Oh my goodness. So it's going to be interesting. And we definitely, again, this is one of the reasons why I love this platform is because we can bring conversations like this and have them and keep this. We really, until we get to where we're working together, we just got to keep trying. I mean, I know it's hard for, I don't know how hard it is for everybody else, but it get a little hard for me to kind of hold on to this when it's like, y'all not in this for me. Y'all in this for yourselves. It really, really feels like that. It's like, what people y'all thinking about when you can say, all right, you could just carry your gun on the street. It don't matter. You could be 18 and buy a gun, but you got to be 21 to drink.
Correct.
You can have something that can cause death but you got to be 21 to take a sip of wine, to buy it
Mm-hmm.
rather.
Mm-hmm.
That just,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that don't make sense in my mind. So how
Yeah.
does it make sense in yours? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. So it's like you
But
really not
also,
thinking about the people. Like a 18-year-old was just 17 yesterday. They
correct.
not,
Yeah.
they not,
Yeah.
they haven't, yeah,
Yeah. But Lisa,
they,
those laws you just ran off, those laws that are getting passing are not are not passing with Lisa in mind, right?
yeah,
What I mean by that is those laws are passing with the assumption that everyday citizens aren't paying attention, right? And so the argument for being that you buy guns at 18 is they'll use it as for hunting purposes, for example. Kids are going hunting with their parents, it gotta be those type of things. And again, when I mentioned earlier about stay engaged to the level of your tolerance, there are some people who have just disengaged because it's just the polarizing pollution of it all. They're not checked in. For example, like Florida just passed another election law, right? And so people need to educate themselves on what the new election law says, because it's going to be even harder to vote now, right? What they were able to do in the last presidential election in Florida, not the same anymore, right? And so knowing what you can or cannot do, making sure those of us who vote by mail, making sure that you are still properly registered with your Secretary of State's office. I mean, with your
right.
Supervisor of Elections office is very,
Mm-hmm.
very important. Making
Mm-hmm.
sure that everything every box is checked is going to be important as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to assume because I was good to go in the most recent election, I'm good to go now. When election laws change, those parameters change as well, and there are some people
Mm-hmm.
who are going to prepare to go to vote only to realize the day of election that they're not qualified to vote because they missed a deadline or something, or they didn't properly um, sign some document. Like those things are important to make sure they're in place.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these things, what happened in Georgia in the presidential election in 2020, freaked out a lot of people, especially Republicans, because that the major turnout, especially the black population, that
Mm-hmm.
turnout created a lot of election law changes in Republican ran states.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't predict it, and then when you saw people in line and waiting in line, Lisa,
Right.
it's like, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't happen in our state? So now you got to start changing election laws. And it's important for people who do vote and desire to vote to understand what the laws in their states are saying, so that they educate themselves in that regard. I mean, listen, Governor Kemp in Georgia, he changed the election laws in Georgia right soon after, because he wanted to prohibit another voter turn like they had before.
Mm-hmm.
People have to we have to make sure, at least to that level, that we educate ourselves on what our state's election laws look like, so that we don't find ourselves um, boxed out unawares.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
18 months will go by just like that.
It's gonna go by. I mean, it's already June almost.
Yeah, yeah. Next Thursday makes June 1st, right? So it's gonna
And
go by really fast.
right. And it just seemed like we was just celebrating New Year's. Go by so quick.
Yes, ma'am.
It go by so quick. I see, like you talking about your baby turning 13. It looked like one Sunday the church baby's right here, the next
Yeah,
Sunday they're right there.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
did you
yeah,
grow on me
yeah,
in a week?
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
I agree with that.
it's yeah. So we have to stay aware. We have to stay informed. I think we just have to make sure we purpose in our heart to do it.
Yeah.
As much as I hate politics, and believe it or not, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be the first black female president.
Okay.
I wanted to be the first female president. I wasn't concerned about race at that time. It was different for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I was gonna be the first female president of the United States. You cannot pay me to be in politics now, ever,
Yeah. Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And if I marry somebody, oh my God, it's gonna have to be God if he in
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah. 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 I
It is
respect
it
that.
is so it is so crazy.
I respect that.
It
Lisa,
is.
my thing has always been in politics. I know we at the end, and my thing has always been you have to either love it really good or hate it really bad to be effective, right? I mean, love it mean like you just are enamored by politics you want to get in, or you just hate it. You feel like both sides are just polarizing, they're damaging, and I'm gonna get involved so that I can try to right the ship and things of that nature. My involvement in politics is probably leans more toward the hatred of it all. That's how I got into it. I feel like all of them were corrupt. But I learned as I got into it that policy matters.
Mm.
And for my people, um, minorities are lured. For example, like look at it from a Cuban American, right? Cuban Americans have been lured to vote Republican. And if you talk about socialism, socialism creates fear amongst Cuban voters, and so they usually vote Republican because Republicans usually have a very anti-socialism standpoint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why I stay engaged is not really for an over infatuation of politics as much as is God has blessed me with a platform professionally, but also pastorally, where I need to educate myself, be able to educate my parishioners, right? Because my mom, who's I know who's watching, my mom made me laugh at the most recent election. I'm not gonna mention any name. It was our local house seat that had Greg James and Gallup Franklin and a few others. My mom one time at the church had her ballot. She wanted me to help her with the ballot. And I was kind of just walking her through everybody who was running. We got to the house seat, and I was walking her, telling everybody who was on the house seat who they were, what their platform was, so on and so forth. And she looked right at Gallup. I'm gonna mention his name, and she said, "Oh, that's a young man who sent me a flyer in the mail. I like him." That was it. Like no matter what I said about their platforms, she remembered getting a mailer. Now, here's what's interesting. Doing this for a long time. Prior to that conversation, I would have said to Lisa, and that mailer stuff don't work anymore. People don't care about mailers anymore. But again, it's generational, right? The older generation, they care about the literature.
They love that mail.
And my mom proved it, like literally Gallup sending her a mailer made a difference. He stood out in her mind against the other ones in that race over a mail piece.
Right.
And so, it's people like that where, it's my mom does not like politics, but she's going to vote. Now my mom may be the person who votes because you look like her, right? It may be that, but she's going to vote.
Yeah.
Our younger group, right? It's trying to get them engaged enough to vote. And I do believe, though, over a matter of 2 or 3 more elections, if that, your niece's age population are going to become the difference makers. I do believe that they're going to become the difference makers. They're going to get fed up.
Yeah,
they're getting fed up.
Yeah.
So yeah, people, please stay engaged. Please do research. Stay engaged. Ask questions, but most importantly, know what your state's election laws say, because a lot has changed since the last time you voted.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. So I'm gonna have to organize a show for that and see if I can get because I did do, I forget what election it was, but we did an interview with the supervisor of elections. So it's always always good to have that information. So
yeah. I mean, the governor just signed a new election law for Florida yesterday. Wow. And in that law, Lisa, was the language that allowed him, like before that law, in the books, you had to resign to run, right? So he couldn't file for president and run for president without signing that election law yesterday. So it was all coincide. But he just signed the new election law yesterday. And so I definitely would encourage you.
So before you had to give up your seat in order to.
So real quickly, I know we're past time. Real quick, I think this is important. When Florida changed the law temporarily when Chris was governor, because if you remember, Chris was being vetted as potential VP candidate for John McCain. Florida's law said that if you're going to run for federal office, you had to resign your current seat to run for office. And so they changed the law temporarily to allow for Chris to remain as the sitting governor while also being vetted for potential VP. That had an expiration date on it. Current law prior to yesterday had it where Governor DeSantis, for example, would not be able to run for president and still occupy the governor's mansion. He would have to resign as governor to run. We know now the governor's seat is not up until 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And so the legislature, toward the latter part of session, put language in a big election law that says that they didn't mention the governor's name. They just said that a sitting governor, a sitting Florida governor, does not have to vacate the governor's office to run for United States president. That language inserted into that election bill allows the governor now to remain sitting governor while also running for president. And if he were to be unsuccessful running for president,
he would still be governor.
He still finishes out his term, which is November of 2026. But that all got signed yesterday in a larger election bill, which is why I was saying people need to understand what their state's election laws is. Here in Florida, we've had 2 consecutive years of an election law being passed where more changes being made.
And so now how are you going to do your job as a governor while you on the campaign trail?
Well, so as a guy who's done this for a long time and worked for governors, the summer is usually the time when you're on the road a lot anyway. But the direct question is, we don't know, right? We've never had a sitting governor in the history of our state run for U.S. president. So this is a first across the board.
Mm.
We really don't know, right? So we're going to learn all this as we go. As we go.
Again, fixing it for you and not worry about the people.
And for all the people, Lisa, who will gripe about this, here's what I will say that's germane to our topic. This is why you have to vote.
You have to vote.
Because Republicans went into election night with 78 Republicans in the Florida House of Representatives out of 120. They ended election night with 85 Republicans, which gave them supermajority. The Republicans in the Senate went in at 25. They came out at 28 out of 40, supermajority, because you have to vote. And when you don't vote and you give one part supermajority, you then get laws that you will later complain about, but you can't stop because you are in the super minority. This is why voting matters, because you get laws that you may feel like is disenfranchising a population of people. And this is a result of a party turning out the vote and other ones not.
Wow.
And I leave on that depressing note.
But we got to keep doing it, y'all. We got to keep voting. Got to keep voting. Thank you so much.
Always honored. Thank you
for hanging out with me tonight. This again is a very, very, very important subject matter. We just have to keep doing what we're doing. We got to keep voting. We got to keep being. I love Sybil Wilkes. Be informed. Be empowered. You got to know. You got to know, because when we don't. And that's including me, because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to hear one more thing. But we just gotta keep at it. Gotta keep at it. So if you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and make sure you turn on your notifications so you will never miss another show. If you're watching us on Facebook, hit the like button. Again, turn on those notifications so when we pop up, you'll be able to see it and just log right in. We will be here next Thursday at this same time, 9 o'clock. I'm going to go and fight with my guys to see what happened with them. But, we'll be all right. We're going to keep
all right. You got this. You got this.
We're going to keep it moving and we're going to make it do what it do. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us tonight. Again, I was about to say Dr. McGhee. Maybe it's coming.
Oh, my gosh.
Appreciate you so much, Pastor D, for hanging out and having this talk. We just can't say it enough. Go vote, go vote, go vote, go vote, go vote, go vote. I know we ain't voting for another 18 months, but it'll be here in 2 days. Yeah.
Exactly.
It'll be here in 2 days before we know it. So thank you. And we will see you all next week this time. Thank you. Bye.
Let's talk What you wanna talk about? Let's talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? You can talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? You can talk, let's talk. Conversations that cool. You can talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? You can talk, let's talk. Conversations that cool. Let's talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about?